morning, everybody. Welcome to the Public Works and Natural Resources Committees. We have two items this morning. With me on the committee is Councilman Terry Borneman, Councilmember April Barker. I also see Councilmember Lillquist and Councilmember Stone are here too. We're going to flip the items. We're going to do the second item first, which is increasing apprenticeship utilization in Bellingham municipal contracts. Over the years, constituents have requested that the city find ways to encourage more contract apprenticeship utilization. The Public Works and Natural Resource Committee has invited a variety of stakeholders to discuss how the city can increase apprenticeship utilization in municipal contracts. Joining the committee today are representatives from the Associated General Contractors, AGC, and Northwest Washington Central Labor Council. So I think what we'll do is just start over here and go around the room and introduce everybody, and then we'll get started.
I'm Michelle Stalvich. I'm the president of Northwest Washington Central Labor Council.
Trevor Smith. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Northwest Washington Central Labor Council and with Labor's Local 292.
Lance Calloway with AGC of Washington, the Northern District Manager.
Neil Hartman. I'm the Legislative and Political Director for the Washington State Building and Construction Trades Council.
Brian Heinrich, Mayor's Office.
Chad Schlauser, City Engineer.
Dick Carlson, Public Works.
April Barker, Bellingham City Council, and I think we have somebody on the phone too.
Yes, Gene Knudsen, Bellingham City Council. Go ahead.
And Terry Borneman, Bellingham City Council.
And who's the person on the phone? I forget. Jacqueline, are you there?
Jacqueline, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, this is Jacqueline Sterna, Director of Government Affairs for the Building Industry Association of Whatcom County.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. Where do we start? Ted, you want to say anything first?
Sure. Ted Carlson, Public Works. Councilmember Barker asked us about the city's use of apprenticeship in our capital projects, and so we provided a little bit of background on what the requirements are when we have federal funds in our transportation projects working with the DOT. And we can provide a little bit of that background maybe to get the discussion started, but we're certainly here to answer questions and listen to what other folks have to say and try to work forward on this issue. So we do have apprenticeship requirements on any project that has federal transportation funds. I should maybe back up a little bit. Not all of our projects have that requirement. It's a process working through the Department of Transportation where the DOT has a statewide goal that they have to meet. And they do look at all the local agency projects that have federal funds and make determinations on a project-by-project basis. So not every project has a percentage requirement, but many do of our larger projects. So we can go through that process, and Chad's looked at kind of a history of our projects, and we can talk about the ones that have had a percentage requirement and answer some questions about what that means for our staff, for our project engineers, our inspectors, and our accounting techs. We've also, since Councilmember Barker approached us with this issue, done a little bit of outreach to other local governments that have adopted a local program, and there's many, as you know, in the state that have. So we've talked to our counterparts to get some information on how that's working for them, how they went about developing their program, some of the things they looked at in terms of setting project thresholds, what are the projects that do qualify for the program, and a little bit about how they've administered it and what it's meant for their staff. And then what we would like to do, and I'll turn it over to Chad in a second, he can go through that, but just kind of hear from the other folks and kind of look at some of the details that would have to be worked out if the council did decide that you wanted to move forward with a local program. And we know that our counterparts across the street are a little bit ahead in this process and have adopted have introduced kind of a draft ordinance and a draft program that I think they'll be discussing tomorrow a little bit further. So maybe Chad, talk a little bit about the current program that we work on, some of the projects it applies to and what it means to our folks.
Sure, Chad Schlauser, Public Works. So with our projects, we've got about an average of 2 projects a year that have federal funds in them. Whenever there are FHWA funds that WashDOT administers for us, we have to, or they assign us both DBE goals as well as apprenticeship hours. They're, as a state, are trying to hit a 15% requirement because of areas that can't meet that or don't have maybe enough apprenticeship programs in the area, we see, and it works the same way with DB Eagles, we see them having a lower threshold, so we end up making up for that. So they get their average of 15%. In order to get that 15%, they look at hours, and they go in 400-hour increments across the board. And so what they do is they take their our engineer's estimate for our programs and go through that and say, okay, what are the two highest areas of work that are involved with this? They then take those and break it down into hours, and like I said, 400-hour increments based on their general special provisions requirements that we employ in our contract. So, like I said, we've got about, on average, about 2 federal projects a year. All of those have apprenticeship hours. Our last 2, Mahogany Avenue had 800 apprenticeship hours in it. Our waterfront project, the Gallows project, had also 800 hours. We've got another couple coming out this year, our Orchard Street project and our Horton project. Horton is going to look a lot like Mahogany. I would predict that we're probably looking at 800 hours. Orchard is going to be bigger. If I were to guess, I'd say we're probably looking at 1,200 hours, but I don't know that for sure yet.
That is there a range of what the project has to cost?
There is not on the federally funded or federally administered ones. I know state, the WashDOT administered ones, I believe they have a $2 million threshold on that. But they don't for the FHWA ones, I believe mainly because those all end up being larger than $2 million anyway. Those are our projects that are bigger, and we get those grants for those. They do look at it from a working day perspective, and if they've got less than, they figure, say you've got 60 working days on a project as opposed to dollars. If you've got 60 working days on a project, figuring 8 hours a day, so you've got 480 working hours, because they're in 400-hour increments, they then say that anything less than 55 working days, say they're not really even going to look at because they're not going to be able to establish enough hours for a program.
Okay. Okay, what I think we'll do now is start over here and hear from the representatives. And I do want to stress, as it was stressed already by Ted, that we're in the early stages of this, so we're here to listen. Anybody that, go ahead.
Trevor Smith, the whole idea behind this ordinance is to include more opportunities for people to learn and to deal with the skills gap and to deal with the fact that as the workforce ages, we're seeing more people starting to retire, and we need to make up for that workforce. So the goals behind this and the impetus behind this for the council and for the building trades is to get more people in and to get the best skilled, trained apprentices into the workforce and get them out of it, so that there is not a skills loss over time, right? We also see throughout where we see these programs that there's a lot more diversity and inclusion, and that helps everybody. We're also looking at trying to help keep the tax dollars that are generated here in this locale, so that we can use that to help train the next generation. And that's just the basic sum.
So I think that, I'm Michelle Stelvich, President of Northwest Washington Central Labor Council. I really believe that we have to start preparing for our future. And we know that we're going to not have as many skilled trades. And if we don't start making a specific plan and particular standards within our public works, that we will be lacking. And it's going to be harder to get that particular groups of people to stay here and to work. Also, we're having a much more diverse communities in the future, and making sure that our programs and our apprenticeship programs really include people of color and women, and we see that those are great populations that are growing in this particular area. And that looking at an ordinance or something that really then helps to set a standard so that we can then begin to build this and have a place to start. That's what we're looking at. And also that we want to make sure that our children have opportunities in the future. And if we're not investing in this community as community members and we live here, we want to make sure that our children can stay here and afford to live in Bellingham and Whatcom County. And so we see that apprenticeship programs is a way that they end up having good wages and being able to stay here and be able to afford this particular economy that we have. And we know that in downturn times that we also have to plan. And public work projects are often things that we see in downturns because we will need those workers in the future, even if there is a downturn. And this is one of the ways that we can set a standard so that we can have those workers in the future. Because right now we are facing where we just have a lack. And part of it is when we had the downturn, we didn't have as many people going into apprenticeships. And so that we need to be very forward thinking in the next 10, 15 years and looking at an ordinance and looking at our public work projects and making sure there is apprenticeships in those projects is one way that we can plan for our future.
Lance Calloway with AGC. I agree completely with what Trevor and with Michelle, what they said. We do have an aging workforce. We are going to have, it's estimated in the next 10 years, 750,000 people that are going to leave the construction trades. So this is something that's very evident. I think the situation that we need to really look at is enhancing our workforce development. That is key for our future, particularly in the trades. Now, mandating these types of situations in Whatcom County, I do not think is the way to go about this. We need to also understand, here in Whatcom County, we have 85% of our contractors, and these are the contractors are the ones that are doing the work, and subcontractors that are doing the work for Whatcom County, City of Bellingham, Port of Bellingham. They have grown over the years, and these companies grow because they produce good projects, they have good people employed, they operate in a safe manner. And the other aspect, they invest in their employees. Apprenticeship is a great program, albeit antiquated. Apprenticeship has not evolved as the business of the construction industry has changed. Construction nowadays, they're looking for people that are able to be cross-trained and do several different activities as part of their crew. This allows for cost efficiencies, as well as to increase the diversity for the employee to keep them engaged. This is something that's very important, especially with today's younger workers. They, in blue collar or white collar, they're not sticking around as long as what has historically been. They're people that get bored and look for a different thing. They hop. So this is one of the things that we're needing to do also is look to change the dialogue. Many of us that are sitting around the table probably heard this statement: if you don't go to college and get a 4-year degree, you're going to end up doing construction, okay? That is not a positive reflection upon our industry by any stretch of the imagination. And we know that there's a lot of good opportunities for people to make a living wage. Currently, you have a carpenter doing 40 hours a week. He's going to make over $125,000 a year doing involved in public works projects. They make good wages based on the prevailing wage, and that's the aspect that kind of levels the bar as prevailing wage in regards to public work. We should be looking at how to incentivize our open shop contractors, because they do not get credit for the OJT that they provide their employees. They send them to additional classes. They do train them. They do produce highly skilled workers. They do produce safe workers. So this is the aspect that also needs to be considered. We have had a great harmony in Whatcom County with our contractors, that there hasn't been any infighting per se. This has, this type of a mandate has the potential to kind of disrupt that harmony. We need to look at how we can just bring more people into the industry and not into something that's been typically looked at as a union-only process.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Then Jacqueline, you're next.
Thank you. Again, my name is Neil Hartman. I'm with the State Building and Construction Trades Council, and I just want to first applaud you for going down this road. I think it is extremely advisable, and we always welcome local municipalities taking a close look at apprenticeship utilization. We are very large fans of apprenticeship utilization. I have personally been involved for more than a decade on the implementation of statewide apprenticeship utilization. So I have worked with WashDOT. I know about the processes that they have developed. I know about the successes that their particular implementation model is used. So I know they are good ones to work with and advise on this. Gosh, there's a lot to say here, and we don't have a lot of specifics to look at, but to address some of the remarks made by my friend here, Lance, this notion that apprenticeship is antiquated is of interest. Frankly, we do have a long tradition of teaching apprentices in the standard apprenticeship model here in Washington State, and we have existed for a long time because we are so efficient at what we do. The apprenticeship programs retrain our members. They are one of the most advanced training models that you can possibly have. Our training facilities are the most advanced training facilities you're going to find anywhere. But, you know, right now, I don't know if you're aware, but elsewhere at the state level, at the federal level, apprenticeship is a buzzword. Everyone is trying to pursue apprenticeships as the next way to like create a career pathway for folks, whether it's in nursing, whether it's in, I mean, we've got line chef programs that are being looked at for apprenticeship. The model is solid. And we've seen a lot of success elsewhere in the state where this has been implemented. I know there's been some discussion about the thresholds, about where one would implement this, and your general public works across the state is at $1 million, and that has proven to not be a problem. There are safeguards for where there's for if there is a problem accessing apprentices, but the reality is $1 million across the board has done quite well. I was personally involved in negotiations prior to this last legislative session with the Capital Projects Advisory Review Board, and that has members from the contractor community, from the public owner side, from labor, architects, and we had just agreed on a piece of legislation that CPARB had actually endorsed and was promoting, and it has to do with job order contracting, which is an alternative bid mechanism, and we found that we were able to get to an agreement on a $600,000 threshold for apprenticeship utilization for the purposes of those job order contracts. So the fact is we're actually lowering those thresholds and we're finding ways of making that work. I think that is a trend in the right direction. This notion that we might be considering something as high as $3 million, I mean, that knocks off the vast majority, if not all of the work being done at the city level right now. So I think that is the wrong direction to go in. Folks out there that are in the contracting world have experience with apprenticeship utilization, whether it's through federal or state public works programs. So, you know, when we had the phase-in models in the legislation that I've worked on, that was all to introduce folks to it. But the fact is, it's been around for more than a decade now. People are familiar. There is no need to start out at $3 million and walk your way down. I mean, the experience is there. You know, and in fact, in this region in particular, there's going to be even higher demand for apprentices, which is excellent given the points that have already been made by folks about the skills gap, the fact that with the next recession, we'll see a bunch of the older workforce leave and not come back. That is a very, very serious problem for the region and the state, the country, frankly. But this is a way that we can protect against that. This policy ensures that we're training the next generation workforce so that when we do have construction, when we do grow as a community, we have people there to build. And it creates great career opportunities. It does have great women and minority participation. I mean, I can go on and on about the merits. I guess one thing I would like to throw out there, apart from the thresholds and the manageability, would also be any thoughts around state versus federal apprenticeship standards. The fact is that the state standards, the State Apprenticeship Council, which has got both business and labor management that direct it, that sets a super high standard for what we can expect, and it creates a standard. The key word here is standard, something that we know and we come to expect what a worker is going to bring to the table. And it has to do with safety, it has to do with productivity. But the fact is that the federal standard has got, it frankly shouldn't even be called requirements. The fact is it's a name, but the state apprenticeship actually goes and checks out people's programs. It's got benchmark requirements for the actual performance of those programs. You have to update information on those programs. So if you want to have a good program, I just have to say it's our experience that the state approved program is the only way to go. To knock it back to federal would be completely insufficient. So with that, I can go on and on if you have any questions, since we do have a lot of experience
Okay,
here.
now we're going to hear from Jacqueline, then we'll open up for questions.
Jacqueline, they would like to hear from you now.
Thank you. Well, the Building Industry Association agrees that Whatcom County is facing a talent acquisition issue and that workforce development over the next decade or so is something that's important to address and develop. However, we have 2,300 registered general contractors in Whatcom County, and most of those general contractors could not afford to meet an apprenticeship requirement on city or county public works contracts. It's not a model that is feasible for our members. Most of our companies tend to recruit and train internally, so they do recruit workers who will stay for the long term in Whatcom County, make an excellent wage, and also work in a very safe way. So we'd be interested in finding incentives or credits for companies that are already engaging in workforce development within the county, within their own businesses. We see the apprenticeship, we see value for apprenticeship, but having to have it mandated is what creates some issues. For example, having to travel for specific apprenticeship training down to CTIC or further south to some of the training centers in Pierce County would be very, very difficult for Whatcom County residents. And it's also expensive. So we do have a lot of concerns. I did share some of our concerns in a letter that I emailed last week. And ultimately, we'd like to see a plan for workforce development where we are recruiting young people into the construction trades, giving them access to a hands-on career that they can maintain and engage in a very good salary for the long term.
Okay, before we open up for questions from Council, Brian, you want us to say anything on behalf of the mayor?
Brian Heinrich, Mayor's Office. I think interesting comments from folks around the table, appreciative of that. I think from the administration's perspective, I think finding that balance between cost and things that go into tracking administrative burden, things of that nature, versus the overall goal of workforce training. I mean, I think that is the detail that we're looking to try and mine down to and understand what that looks like. And as Ted mentioned, we know Whatcom County is considering something very similar, and I believe in their I don't know if it's in their ordinance or maybe their resolution that they reference being able to align what Whatcom County and what the city of Bellingham want to do. I think the point has been made that the Whatcom County contractors, the vast majority of whom we work with, do work both for Whatcom County and for the city of Bellingham, in addition to the small cities. And so there seems to me there's value in having that alignment if we can get to that point. But I think that's it from the administration side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Council, Terry?
Yeah.
You want to turn your mic on?
Yep. Got one question to start with. Lance had mentioned about people coming into the construction trades and moving out, the lack of longevity within the field. What I would like to ask was, do we have any statistics about longevity of those that go through apprentice programs? That's about staying within the trades.
Trevor Smith. I am not sure. We do have statistics about most of the programs. I'm not sure about staying in. I can tell you from a personal point of view, I've been in 20 years. I came through the apprenticeship program. I started as a 60%er. Now this is my 20th year. Mm-hmm. I can think of, I don't know, about 15 people who live here in Whatcom County that we all went into the apprenticeship program together, and we're still in the trades. I realize that's a personal anecdote, not a numbers, but I will endeavor to find that for you.
Go ahead.
One of the values that comes from an approved apprenticeship program with that standardization of education is the journey level certificate that you can get by having a set level of education. That means that a worker can go from job site to job site, from contractor to contractor, and they are frankly more employable for that. So if I had to guess, I would say because they are certified, and I mean our workers they can work all over the world. I've got folks that I work with that did a stint down in Antarctica, in New Zealand, in France. I mean, that is one of the highest values that comes from this education, is a certification that's recognized globally.
Chad, on the programs where we've already done like mahogany, is the cost of trying to keep track of and administer that, is that coming out of the federal government side? Or is that something in those projects that then you as staff have to spend the time doing the management of that contract and this apprenticeship piece.
Right, so we do have to, we manage all that paperwork through that, and so we then have to, move forward with all the paperwork that the state requires when we do our grant requests, and that we have to file back to them. So that comes out of, I'm not going to say it comes out of the grant dollars, because those are all kind of intermingled funds. So when we do our grant requests, we're making the request based on staff time and hours, as well as the construction costs in that. So that's all kind of incorporated in there. I don't know if that answers your question.
The municipalities that you talked with, what did you find for them on extra cost in this?
Yeah, so one of the ones that, I don't know how long their program's been in place, but I think it's Spokane, or was City of Spokane, obviously a little bit larger than us in terms of population, and have a few more projects. I think they generally had maybe 18 capital projects going at a time, and we're usually closer to a dozen across all of our projects. And as Chad mentioned, maybe 2 of those 12 that we carry have federal funding that trigger the apprenticeship programs. What Spokane did, based on our conversation, and this was to get a program up and running, they did hire a staff person to help, and that's to kind of create the program, look at the different models, make sure that they're getting a process in place. And over time, that's gone from a full-time employee down to maybe 15% of that employee's time year-round, and maybe as high as a quarter of their time during the heavy construction season. So right now, what happens on our projects is there's a little bit of administrative effort by all the staff involved, and the inspectors have responsibilities in the field, just like they do with DBE goals, to go out and do verification in the field on who the apprentice are on the job site, just like they do with disadvantaged business and minority businesses. Then our accounting techs that do the payroll, so they have to go back and look at the payroll to line up to make sure that, you know, the correct people are working in the correct labor rate. So that's an effort. At this time, as an example, we have one person that works on that in our capital projects, and they have between 60 and maybe 100 subcontractors that they're working with all the time. So they're looking at that amount of payroll every month, and then monthly she goes through that. So that, you know, I don't know what percentage of her time that is, but it's a significant work item, especially when things don't line up and you're chasing it down with the contractor. Right now, a lot of that is managed by DOT, and DOT has some pretty good tools available to contractors for putting the information into the website. A lot of it obviously falls on the contractor, and we're in a verification role as the city. One of the things we would have to work through is if the city had a local program and we didn't have the state's kind of infrastructure to support that program, we'd have to find a way to perhaps manage that more efficiently. What that would look like would depend on exactly what the program details were. But so in terms of staff time, I think it depends. It depends on the type of program, you know, what the process might be for determining. As was mentioned, there's projects that would be excluded from the program, perhaps because you just couldn't get apprenticeship programs, whether it's because the apprentice didn't exist for that type of trade, or we have projects that, if you use the $1 million threshold as an example, we have projects that are generally more utility projects that might be $1 million, and in an extreme case, maybe 600,000 or 700,000 of that is equipment. You know, and you're just going to have processes for saying those projects are going to have to be, for lack of a better word, exempted out of the program, because you wouldn't be able to meet the requirements because you don't have enough labor hours, as Chad was saying. So those are the kind of details as we work through we would have to talk about. But in conversations with the different cities, it kind of depended. Spokane, I think we found, was the best example, because some of the other cities hadn't had the program long enough, or hadn't had enough qualifying projects to really have a lot of input. I don't know if you have more details on that.
No, I really don't have more details on that, but I would like to add that those 60-plus subcontractors that Ted mentioned that our staff is currently tracking are on our 3 federal projects that are under construction right now. So that doesn't include our private development. We're under construction with about a dozen projects at any one point in time.
Sure.
Lance, your organization's about 50-50 open shop and union, and then you have apprenticeship programs for non-union or open shop, I think is what we call it. And so Jacqueline was just talking about having to travel to get to these apprenticeship programs that somebody from an open shop might have. Can you explain that more? And are they looking at increasing that when we do require more apprenticeships? Would that maybe spur more training for those kinds of things and bring them further north?
Yeah, what Jacqueline was referring to is CITC, Construction Industry Training Centers, or Council, excuse me. And they're based out of Bellevue, but there are different centers across the state. Here in the furthest north is in Marysville. They just opened the CITC facility a little over a year ago there. So that is one of the aspects that she's referring to. The other aspect is that the contractor, particularly for the small contractor, this becomes a burden for each year. It's approximately $6,000 for a laborer to go through their apprenticeship program with CITC. That's just on the tuition side. Then there's also additional dollars that are paid on a per hour basis by the firm for all their man hours going into the CITC program. It's an excellent program. We do support it from AGC. Again, it's for those contractors that want to choose and utilize an apprenticeship program. That's great. We're not opposed to apprenticeship. I do want to rephrase that. But the aspect what we're not wanting is that becomes a market regulator in regards to the bidding process. We should be looking at a fair and open competition in regards to these public works projects. Whatever contractor chooses, whatever their structure may be, whether it be a union shop or an open shop, that should not be, one of the differentiations if they're eligible to bid on the job or choose to bid on the job. They should be based on their merits of their projects of past, meeting budgets, safety, all of those things that everybody's looking at in the industry.
Gary, do you want to say something?
I thought Michelle
Oh, go ahead,
was looking
Michelle.
like she...
Go ahead, either one of you.
So,
I just wanted to point out that, as far as like the open shop versus the union shop model of the apprenticeship programs, we fund our programs through our members. Part of our dues assessment goes to training, so we fund our training through our members. That's the way it works. So it's relatively.
So does an apprentice pay for parts?
It comes out of the working dues. Yes. Yes, it's self-funded.
Peter, did you want to say anything on the legal end at all?
I'm just here taking in information.
Okay, just checking.
So I would also
Sure,
like
go
to
ahead.
ask Bill Moran to
Sure.
speak on.
So you can come up and speak right behind us here on this microphone.
He has some information regarding success rates in which people stay in the business, and he will be able to explain that better. Thank you.
No, just speak.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Bill Moran. I'm an electrical workers member, Local 191, but previously I was on the State Apprenticeship Council and also the State Apprenticeship Program Manager for LNI. A couple points you were asking about statistics. LNI does keep retention statistics and also completion rates for each program, which I think would be useful for your committee's deliberation. As far as structure of programs, speaking for our industry, they're all nonprofits funded jointly by the member and employer. But in the RCWs, there's a rule that says any firm, whether they're affiliated with union or open shop, can just pay the true cost to enroll a member. So we actually have not only our own members in the training program, but also some open shop members perhaps that are too far from another training program. So that's in the law right now, and it's something we would welcome. I would also like to invite, speaking for our industry, the committee to tour our training center, which I think would be useful, just background to see what's involved. And as far as whether people stay long-term in the industry, we also, in addition to the 5-year apprenticeship program, and they range anywhere from 2 to 5 years depending on the occupation, we offer probably more courses for continuing education so that once a worker is trained to the initial competence, they can either specialize or stay updated in whatever niche of the industry they're in, so. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Any of you other gentlemen like to say something, but you came with the rest of them? Come on up, sir.
Good morning. My name is Billy Wallace. I'm the Political and Legislative Director for the Washington Northern Idaho District Council of Laborers. Just want to put this out there and think long term. Let's think the long game. At some point, there's going to be an administration that will pass an infrastructure package. We have got to be ready for that. When we had the downturn and starting in 2007, 2008 with the laborers, we lost almost 2,800 people because their unemployment ran out and they had to take early retirement. Those 2,800 people were our most talented, most experienced people we had. We are still trying to bounce back from that. So please think about this going forward. There are costs associated with this. You've got to pay for something to get what you want. Think about this long term. We're going to have an influx of money coming in eventually. It's not going to be $2 trillion probably, but it's going to be $1 trillion. Our roads, our bridges, our infrastructure are crumbling. We are working, Neil and I, on a package with everybody else in Olympia, trying to get another package coming up for the Highway 2 trestle, the bridge over the Columbia down south, and a lot of other infrastructure. But one of the most important things about that is the maintenance, operation, and preservation money that Roger Millar needs right now. He's doing it with smoke and mirrors right now. He's doing an amazing job. But we've got to have the people there ready to go and kick in when this money does arrive. So please consider that as we go forward with this. Work something out. Make it happen. We can all work together. The AGC, we get together just fine. We can make this happen. Don't let it fall to the side, please. Thank you.
Sir. Councilmember Lilliput, you had a question.
Thanks, Gene. I'm not on this committee, but I do appreciate giving a chance to share some comments. I'll start with a kind of a simple one, Ted. So you say we approximately 2 out of the 12 or so projects on average already have an apprenticeship mandates. One of the concerns that Lance raised is that having apprenticeship requirements may favor or bias who can bid. Do we see a favoring of, say, out of Whatcom County bidders on those subset that have an apprenticeship mandate? Do we see a difference between those apprenticeship mandated capital projects and the bidding, the costs, and who bids, and the non-apprenticeship mandated ones?
It's a good question. I'll ask Chad to expand a little bit on my answer. I think it's a little bit challenging to say specifically. One of the reasons why is our federally funded projects tend to be our larger projects. And that, to get to my answer, is generally we do have fewer bidders on those projects here in Whatcom County. To the degree that's because of the apprenticeship requirement versus the degree that it's just a larger project. I can't say with specificity which is the bigger issue. It is a question that we have on projects that are, let's just say if it's around that $1 million threshold or 600,000, that's been, I think that might be Spokane's limit, 600,000, and you mentioned the JOC, which we have a JOC contract here in Bellingham. That would be a question we would have on the smaller projects. Would we see fewer bidders? We have a great contracting community here in Whatcom County. We range from very large, large regional type contractors to contractors that a $600,000 project would be a large project. And we like that competition. As council knows, when we bring bid awards forward, we usually have a large number of bidders. It's usually very competitive, which is obviously good for the public. And we would want to make sure whatever program, if a program were implemented, we don't want to reduce that competition. And to the degree the threshold plays a part in that, that's a discussion we would like to perhaps more of. And council, if maybe some of the folks around the table could speak to that, that would be helpful for staff as well.
Terry.
Yeah, this is comments, not questions on it. I'm really interested in looking at having staff explore with us moving forward towards a local program. We talk a lot about living wages and how in this community we're falling way behind on living wages. And this is a program that people graduating in the trades and graduating out of apprentice programs are making really good money. They are making those kind of jobs. A lot of times when we talk about living wages, we look at, oh, we want high-tech jobs. Well, we've got the areas for jobs right now, and we're falling behind on getting the skilled, trained workforce in there. The apprenticeship programs have a long track record of proving that they work, and they're providing great training, and from what I've understood, you know, people do stay in it. I've known a lot of people that have went through those programs, people that aren't necessarily college material in that they're hands-on learners. You know, they're not going to just sit there and listen to somebody lecture to them and write down the notes. But very skilled, very talented, very bright people that are great with working with their hands and doing those kind of skills. You know, I sometimes see, and I understand the concerns sometimes with competition in certain businesses, but on the one hand, we see in this community business groups who support housing and other kind of stuff, pushing for the highest price the market will bear for things like housing. But when it comes to the other end, with wages, we also see the push to get at the lowest wage possible for the workers. So it never meets. And I feel the apprenticeship program is one of those programs that can help provide that training to get that skilled workforce going. So I would be very much in favor of us exploring farther the idea of what a local apprenticeship program would look like.
Okay. April?
Well, I want to, there's kind of two separate things that I'm hearing from both groups, so I want to try to parse them out a little bit. And one is the adding capacity and providing training programs. And it sounds like both our open shop and our unions really want to see a plan moving forward of Whatcom County of how we're driving that. And I don't think that's exactly what we're trying to address here today. I think that would be an excellent conversation for us to have with our county partners and with the port. Like, what is that plan and how are we really utilizing the kiddos that we're raising here to make sure that they know that this is available, and then what are those investments we need to make as a community to make that happen. So with that aside, the reason why I always heard it come up is because you're using taxpayer dollars for these contracts, and we want to see the best return on an investment, and that's why folks were really pushing towards the apprenticeship program. So I really want to distinguish those two things, because what it tends to come back to is, well, this isn't going to solve the labor problem, and it's not. It could potentially bring in more, and I say potentially at first because I haven't mentioned any of the data that I saw, but in our packet here, they look at all of the different programs. So they look at apprenticeship, basic education for adults, community and technical college, and department service for blind, and there's another one. And this is from the Workforce Training Results Executive Summary, the Workforce Training and Education Coordination Board. And AGC sits on that, right? Okay. So this is a large group. This is government, business, working together, and labor. And for the apprenticeship, if folks go back to the packet, you can see it talks about employment, earnings, skill, net employment, net earning impact, participation, return on public investment, and then taxpayer return on investment. So on the participant return on public investment, which is what I've heard constituents asking us to really consider, is the ratio of the present value of additional lifetime participant earnings and employee benefits to public cost of the program. Additional lifetime participating earnings and benefits are additional earnings and employed benefits received. This is minus the participating program cost, taxes added to the income, and any loss in unemployment insurance benefits when compared to the non-participating control group. So that's 71 to $1. And that's from this group. I mean, that's pretty huge when you talk about it. And we really push folks on our housing levy, our TBD, because we're able to really leverage and maximize those. So I thought this was a little bit different, but it is a return on investment. And then the taxpayer return on investment is 36-1 when we have these apprenticeship utilizations conversation in there. So there is a cost at the local level, but I do want to just bring it back to, there was some confusion around when people are asking us to do this. It's not necessarily going to fill that entire gap, but it's a request that if you're going to use public dollars, you want to be using them in a way that gives you the best public benefit. I'll give that there. And then I did have a question for Lance, as far as kind of circling back to my last question of more opportunities. We have local contractors here, and I see the concern that if we were to do something like this, we wouldn't want to push out the people who are already here. But we also have, is it Pete Dawson's group that's going to have their own little university that really, is that, no, okay. It's not Pete's. Okay, well, there's some that are local here, open shop, that kind of, like you said, do their own certification, their own education, but it doesn't quite meet the apprenticeship standards. Is that?
Actually, what you're referring to is it's one of our contractors here in Whatcom County that pretty much exclusively works at the refineries, and this was in response to their high hazard facilities bill, which has been brought about in regards to apprenticeships utilization out there, which is actually higher than what we're talking about here. That was strongly challenged by the local contractors. What they're doing now is they're looking to, one local contractor is looking to set up 8 apprenticeships within their company to meet potentially their needs.
Okay, thank you.
So as far as the committee's concerned, are we all in agreement that we'd like to move forward and continue to discuss this? Michael, go ahead.
Well, maybe the committee should answer first, but
Okay.
I would join Terry in saying I am interested in looking at a local apprenticeship program. I hear everyone saying that the apprenticeship programs are valuable and successful. April pointed out the return on investment to the individual, to the public. So it's a winning program. So there's only two generally things to work out. One is the threshold level. What is that level? And what kind of exemptions or good faith provisions, for when it doesn't quite fit a simple dollar threshold. I think we can work that pretty easily. And then the second thing I think is more of an issue has to do with how apprenticeship is defined and what training opportunities are available. You suggested that the state definition is far better, more workable. So we can start there. That definition, as I read it, is in the materials, didn't refer to open shop versus union. So that's sort of my question. If unions are stepping up with qualified apprenticeship programs, good on them. If an open shop doesn't want to use a union training program, or an open employee, a non-union employee doesn't want to use it, well, I mean, what are their options? It seems to me that if our concern is apprenticeship, we don't have to mandate how they get it, but it has to be a true apprenticeship or a true job training program. So my question is, for people who aren't going to take the union route, tried and true, what is the other route? Is that equally good from a public policy perspective?
Go ahead.
I can speak to that after talking to several of our larger contractors who operate here in Whatcom County. They have training programs that they put their entry-level employees to and through. They not only have on-the-job training, they also send them to many ongoing educational classes, but through AGC, through ABC, and through some other private entities. So these open shop contractors do have a pathway that they're training and developing their entry-level workers. Does it
meet the state standard, or would it?
The thing is, it's not equitable, and that's the thing is it is not recognized. And many of these open shop contractors, employees, could go into to a union and follow through in that, but it's one of those things they're choosing not to go through a union route.
Michelle, you then Ted.
Labor and Industries has a long-standing record of having a standard for training. And it's been very successful and is reviewed. There's peer review, there's groups that are reviewing the curriculum. So I have concerns if it's not meeting that. This is a well-established curriculum. It has safety standards. I mean, it has training that's very specific for people to be able to do these industries, because I want the electrician that wires something to be certified so that I know that that house or that building is safe. I mean, I want to make sure that who we bring to the table or who we bring to do this work can meet those standards. And I know that in the future, we don't have to worry that something's going to happen because they didn't meet a standard. And I think that labor industries is as well established this.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. There are all kinds of training programs out there that people offer, but the standard is really essential. And folks that are looking to create state-approved apprenticeship programs, as many are, with passage of 1817, the high hazard refinery bill, they can. You know, we have a track record of non-union programs that have gone before the Apprenticeship Training Council and been approved that were non-union. You have a Vista Corp out in Spokane, to speak to the point about electricians. You have Nichols Brothers Shipyards. They also went and took their program and got it approved at the state apprenticeship. Or you have CITC, also approved. It's just a matter of having these standards. I mean, some of the folks that have their training programs are 2 weeks long and mixed in terms of the crafts that they are allegedly training to versus a 5-year program. And to the investment, I think it is really important when we're looking at the savings to taxpayers. I mean, just along the I-5 corridor alone, union programs spend $1 billion annually on the training of their members. So that is industry funded. That is a great thing for the local municipalities and state to take advantage of, that there are programs out there that are taking care of themselves and hitting these standards. But I just want to say it is not a union, non-union issue. Any program that can meet the muster can pass the State Apprenticeship Training Council. So, I mean, you've got both labor and management on there.
Go ahead, Ted. Then we're going to close out with Jacqueline, then we have another item. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, just in terms of qualifying programs, I think what would be important for the city is that was very well established, that we don't want to be in the business as the Public Works Department determining whether a program meets a standard or not. That's certainly going to be administratively burdensome and always up for debate. So what we would want to make certain is that whatever does get approved, if something is approved, that it's very clear what the apprenticeship program and the standard that's being met is to qualify. That's all. We just don't want another level of trying to figure out, is this a qualifying training program? I want to say this is a certified program, meets all the requirements, and then we would know it does or it doesn't.
If I can just add to that real quick, I also want to make it real clear that, you know, we build sidewalks and streets and put in water mains and sewer mains, and there's been a lot of talk about the apprenticeships and electricians and all that. And so I just want to be really clear that we're not adding $1 billion to the local economy. We're down here kind of doing what we do. So.
Okay, Jacqueline, you want to go ahead?
Jacqueline, do you have any closing remarks?
Sorry for the delay. I had the phone on mute just to mute out background noise from where I'm at. I think, I'm glad to know that the city is giving a lot of thought and attention to this matter. I just want to reiterate that we really are looking at a talent acquisition issue, and that's related to workforce development in our county. I think that residential home builders are accustomed to having a lot of autonomy in their hiring and training decisions, and that model has worked well for our general contractors. I do see that they want to maintain autonomy in training their own workforce and having that recognized in some way, rather than having a forced apprenticeship placed on them or a requirement placed on them. We are looking at rolling out our own, it's called a PACT, Pre-Apprenticeship Certificate Training Program. It's curriculum with 13 different lessons that would be appropriate for high school or those who graduated high school looking for some workplace or workforce training and developing the skills that they need to be successful in the construction and trades industry. And again, it's looking for that recognition or credit at what is already being done in Whatcom County and what our general contractors have already accomplished. And I think that our safety records, which are some of the best statewide, really speak to what we're already doing.
Okay, thank you. Ted, do you think you have enough to go for our next session, whenever that is?
Yeah, we'll work with the committee to work on maybe agenda for a future meeting. And just the last thing, and along with that is we'll work with the other departments, because while we're Public Works, we're really talking about public work. So it could be Parks Department, it would be our facilities. And while Chad oversees the engineering division, we do a lot of larger $1 million plus projects out of operations and natural resources that don't necessarily have the same administrative support that the engineering division does. So those are the things that we'll talk about internally, bring the other departments in, perhaps work with the committee and Mark, and then bring something back.
Okay,
I
go
think
ahead.
I would like us to have another conversation before you go to drafting
Yeah.
anything. How apprenticeships defined, talking a little bit more about training programs. It sounds like we have some that are local, but they don't quite hit the state level. So I want to honor that we have Lance here representing, and we have a lot of union representatives. So it would be nice to maybe have a balance and talk with some of our local contractors. The L&I, I think there was a good point that there's good information out there, and we could come back with Terry's question to help us understand the longevity. I'd like to hear more from Spokane, and knowing if after, it sounds like we've been doing this for a while, did they have any of that adversarial issue between Open Shop that Lance has maybe mentioned it could preempt, as well as did they see a lack in local contractors bidding or not? And I think that it would at least get us into a little bit further of a conversation to know, in the end, I want to be able to say exactly what we're trying to achieve, and then if we're going to be able to measure if we're going to achieve that. And like I said, I think there's a little separation, and we may just want to hear in a separate, maybe in planning committee, what are we doing for this long-term talent gap? Everything's a crisis. I'm trying to use that term anymore, but the gap that we're looking at in the skilled trades.
Okay, thanks to all of you for coming today. We have one more item to go, and then we'll be done. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jacqueline. We got it.
Quick break. Well,
Right now it goes down here.
Thanks, Lance. See you later.
Take care.
Yep.
Yeah, and so we did work this through.
okay.
Okay.
Pharmacology and everyone said, you can just bring up and I can speak to it if you want.
Okay, we have one other item. It's a resolution authorizing the city to enter into a salmon recovery funding board grant for assisting with the Little Squalicum Estuary project.
Thank you, Ted Carlson, along with Renee LaCroix. This is exactly that. This is requesting that council pass a resolution. It's associated with a grant funding opportunity, requires a resolution from council giving the mayor authorization to pursue this grant. The Little Squalicum Estuary project's been around for a while now. We've been working on getting that project funded, and over the years, we've lost some funding because we were dealing with either permitting issues or approval from Burlington Northern, because this goes underneath their trestle facility, and we need their structural folks to sign off on it. So there's been some timing issues. This is another grant opportunity. It's a great project. Renee can talk more about the project, and we're just trying to secure funding. So.
Excuse me, yeah, I can talk a bit about the project. You probably heard about it over the years and are probably very familiar with it. It's a 2.1 acre nearshore estuary in Squalicum Creek Little Squalicum Creek Park. It's part of the park master plan, and it ranks very high on a lot of salmon recovery project lists because of its proximity to the mouth of the Nooksack. So it does have a lot of habitat value. We've been working on it for years, and as you know, some of these projects take years to get off the ground. So it isn't currently in the budget, but we are hopefully going to put it in the budget once we have assembled a funding package, and this grant is part of our larger funding package.
Terry?
Yeah, I've been supportive of this for a long time, so I have no problem with moving that we move a resolution forward going for this grant.
Okay, motion been made. Is there any further discussion?
No, I'm glad to see us moving forward. I think at the time of this, my children were like in 1st and 3rd grade, maybe. I'm trying to think, maybe 2nd or 4th. And the idea of a place where salmon rest was a very different visual for them. I think now that they're 11 and 13, they might understand a different salmon resting place. But anyway, it's great. I'm glad you're still pursuing it, and it would be added, I think, to especially the children who get to walk back and forth and learn more about salmon and having good habitat for them.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries 3-0. I'll bring that tonight. Thank you very much, everybody. Meeting adjourned.
That little pillow.